Hey, this is Jason Bellamy at Builder Buddy. I'm going to go over an inspection report for a neglected house that is 15 years old. So neglect means that basic maintenance and repairs have not been performed over a 15-year period. And the 15-year mark is significant also because that is a time when things like the water heater and heat pump should have been replaced. So this report for 15-year-old house had 14 red items and 15 orange items. That is more than typical. This is going to be a long report for a 15-year-old house. So just to put this in perspective, we're going to skip through the information items and we're going to get right to the defects. So we're seeing that the grade really was sloping toward the house at all areas. And we just see that the ground around the house and under the house is saturated. The street slopes toward the house under the decks and porches, and there are no curbs at the adjacent driveway, and so the water is just coming in right toward the house. Condensate line for the HVACs are just dumping at the foundation walls. The house is about 3 feet below the surrounding grade at two sides, so that's going to be a wet crawl space, and that's certainly what we saw. And moving on to the downspouts, we see that nearly all the downspouts don't have extension subsurface drains. And so all that roof drainage is just exiting right at the foundation walls, contributing to those that wet environment in the crawl space. And then because the gutters have not been maintained and they weren't installed correctly either in this case, we're seeing wet, soft decayed trim behind the gutters. And we're seeing evidence of settling at the front porch. The decks, we saw a lot of decay and improperly supported joists, missing bolts, missing flashing. So we had a number of observations there. We saw decay at exterior door jambs. We did not see metal drip edge flashing, and that is what helped cause this issue where water is getting behind the gutters. And then we can also, here we have a condition where the roofing is damaged at the gable ends, and that's likely because of the trees that are near the home. When the wind blows, they're hitting the house and damaging that roofing and trim. You can see the gutters have not been maintained at all. And there's our comment about the leaks behind the gutters. And we have a comment about the chimney. We're seeing evidence of settling at patios, probably because of all the water that we're seeing. And moving on, now we're getting into the floor framing of the crawl space. So for a 15-year-old house to see moderate to advanced fungus, that is unfortunate. This is a very wet environment. This fungus is getting close to advanced fungus. In another few years, if these conditions aren't improved, we will see wood-destroying fungus. And looking closer, we see that we have the main beam supported by these wood posts. And these wood posts are just sitting and standing water here and here. And it's starting to decay. So what is going to happen to these main beams as these supporting posts decay? These builders weren't thinking that they were going to have an issue with standing water, and so they just put the wood framing right at the ground. But now this has become a big problem. And we also have a red foundation wall comment because of all that water. There's a number of videos that we won't go over here. But we're seeing evidence of stepping cracks, open cracks, and more settling at the foundation walls. So not just the beams, but a lot of the supporting piers were settling, and we saw sloping floors at the house. So this is what can happen over 15 years with poor initial installation and minimal or no maintenance. We also have this condition where some of the heating and cooling equipment is original and the water heater is original. So this buyer is not only going to have to budget for all these the grading, drainage, and structural repairs that we saw, but also to replace the heat pump and the water heater. We also see some damaged ductwork here in the crawl space. this is a long report. So that's why we picked this one. It goes to show you what can happen in 15 years in some cases. So we have some plumbing defects as well. In this case, for whatever reason, we had a number of electrical defects. It looks like they were trying to do things themselves, and we had a lot of things that weren't wired correctly, outlets that weren't turning on, GFCI outlets with no power. Here we saw a burn mark at a garage. That's not a good sign. Lights were missing smoke detectors. And so with these wet crawl spaces, it's common to see this moisture damage insulation. And because we have missing a ground vapor retarder or plastic sheeting at the ground, that's contributing to this moderate fungus that we're seeing, that and the water penetration from the outside. We have a number of cosmetic observations. Doors that aren't latching properly. We have some cloudy windows and windows that weren't latching, closing properly. We saw some pet-related damages. And that's about it. So this is an inspection report for a 15-year-old house that has been neglected. Thanks for watching.